Late 80s, early 90s, Fort Lauderdale had a pretty healthy rock scene, but it was nothing particular. Personally, I had a real good exposure to industrial and punk music, which might have been a little late, but it was new to me. And for a place that's kind of generic as far as music goes, this was something exciting for me, and definitely an influence. In 1989, I was working with a girl named Cindy Dietz, who would sing for my music, and we put a few demo tunes together. And then I met Brian Warner at a party, and I knew about him being a writer for magazines like 25th Parallel and Tonight Today, and I liked his more creative writing. And so he wanted to be part of a rock band, or wanted to do something like put a band together. So we put a band together. After the first few times I spoke with Brian, I played him some of my demo tapes, some material that I recorded on my own, some I recorded with other people, and so he became interested in my stuff, and he helped expose me to industrial music, which is what made me get a drum machine, because I was playing drums myself beforehand, but using a drum machine was a lot more interesting and easier as far as recording. So he heard my stuff, and I read his stuff, and we got along. And even though he wasn't a singer per se, you know, he got his ideas out, you know, kind of a talk singing sort of thing. And we were into industrial, and nobody in industrial really sang. It was just any melodies were achieved by, you know, synthesizers or samples. But it made for a really good combination. It was a very bizarre, surreal, not quite metal, not quite industrial, very ugly, weird thing. And I didn't think anybody would get into it or fall for it, but it worked out. And shortly after we had a body of songs together, we recruited Brian and Perry, who became, I believe it was Olivia Newton-Bundy and Zsa Zsa Speck to my Daisy Berkowitz and Brian Warner's Marilyn Manson. And that was the first formation of the band. But within about a month or two after that, we got Brad Stewart, who was, his name was Gidget Geen. What really got me as far as, I didn't take the idea of putting a band together seriously, because I was working with someone who had no musical experience and had no experience in the music business except for interviewing performers. And so he kind of learned a little bit about the business, but he knew nothing of the practical aspects of working with a band or writing songs or doing anything on the artistic side. But what really got me that was funny was the idea of using combination names, where, you know, we use the female first name of the first name, I should say, of a female icon, like a positive female icon, and the last name of a mass murderer or a serial killer or a cult leader. And when we came up with Marilyn Manson and Daisy Berkowitz, that was too funny. So when we got everybody else to be a part, anybody else to be a part of the band, they adopted the same names in a similar way, like Olivia Newton-Bundy and Zsa Zsa Speck. Let's see, it was spring. It was late winter, 1990. We had a small body of songs together with the four-piece setup and a drum machine. And we had our first show April 28th, 1990 at Churchill's Hideaway down in Miami. And I remember Brian threw up because he was nervous before we went on. And there were only about, I mean, on any given night, it's like, you know, we were brand new. We went on late, I think maybe it was a Thursday or so. It's just, there were about 10 people there, 10, 15 people there. And about half of them had no idea what was going on and just hated it. and I think the other half were just fascinated at what we were just trying to figure out what the hell we were trying to do. By summertime of 1990, we had Brad, or Gidget Gein, as he was known, on bass, and Stephen, or Madonna Wayne Gacy, playing samples, not quite keyboard, but samples, and we were still using a drum machine. But for whatever reason, this particular setup and lineup was intriguing enough and cool enough and worked well enough as far as songwriting and performing that people really got into it. People really latched on and, for lack of a better phrase, got what we were doing. Brad brought a real, like, rough-edged sort of punk, but more rock and roll punk rather than hardcore punk or you know, British punk. He liked bands like I can hardly remember, just like kind of a New York Dolls, but grittier aspect to him. And Brian liked the way he dressed. I think that's why he got the job. Stephen came into the band just about springtime, and he started out more as a fixture. I mean, I think there were a few shows where he was just on stage playing with Army men. In fact, the one show in particular, July 4th, 1990, we got a spot opening for 9 Inch Nails at a place called Club New down in Miami Beach because Brian had interviewed Trent Reznor a couple of months beforehand for one of the magazines. I think it was 25th Parallel. And we got this great opening spot, and Stephen calls me up one Saturday about 3 weeks before the show. He says, I got a flyer on my car. It says 9 Inch Nails with Meat Beat Manifesto and a special guest Marilyn Manson. And we still have the name Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids. But it was on the flyer, and I was like, how come you found out through a flyer? You know, I guess either it was a surprise to us or Brian didn't have time to tell us or whatever it was. But at that show, Stephen he had this weird costume on. I think it was kind of army, like crazy army man, but with like a leather jacket, and he had a helmet with a flag in it. And he played with army men and threw cold cuts at the crowd, things like that. And that got people, that was a little disturbing. But he went on to play a sampler, to play keyboards. And because he was not formally trained at all in playing keyboards, but he was a computer programmer, and he liked industrial music and metal and all kinds of hardcore, and he loved the idea of being able to make such a wide variety of sounds in such crazy ways. I think one of the main reasons we became so popular so quickly, locally anyway, was because we had a show. Even if there wasn't anything in particular, anything weird in particular that would happen, it's still the way we dressed and the lighting we used and like props we used. There was a show to it, and nobody had, you know, nationwide. I think very few people had any like aspect of show, and more so locally. You know, it was just bands getting up there and playing. It wasn't anything to look at or remember. And our flyers always were exaggerative and just out and out weird and surreal. So that would get people to come. And I think we were kind of divisive in that like a heavy metal fan might come see us just, you know, on the off chance that we might, you know, he might have heard that, oh, what do they sound like? Oh, they're kind of metal, but kind of industrial. And, you know, this metal fan goes to the show and absolutely hates us. Just, they suck, they're stupid, and they're crazy, they don't dress cool. It's like, you know, to be hated is like worked as well as it did to be loved. I mean, if something's so strange that you just hate it because you don't know what it is, that's great, because you're still going to tell people about it. And that's what worked for us. Well, we never actually had anything that produced a real, that had a real risk to it. I mean, we always insinuated things. And if you insinuate anything about any aspect of drugs or violence on a flyer, people are going to come. It's sensationalism. It's just Barnumumism, this way to the egress. What's that? Oh, it's the exit because the place is getting packed, It's not a lie, but, I think any aspect of, we would fake things. It's hard for me to remember lots of specifics, but there was one show we had at the Reunion Room, place in Fort Lauderdale called the Reunion Room, where we had a piñata suspended over the crowd throughout the show, and towards the end of the show, Brian would hand out bats or sticks, or one or two or three of them, and the piñata would have the face of, I don't know, the president or somebody, some authoritarian figure, or, a cardboard cutout of Jesus or something like that. And they would be told to break open the piñata, and they would break open the piñata, and there was all these wet meats and cold cuts that would come out of it. And people they were all laughing and gleeful, and all of a sudden, oh my, it was just unforgettable. The meat piñata was unbeatable. And and the place is packed. I'm on stage, and I can't believe the place is packed. I'm playing. While I'm playing, I'm saying to myself, why are you all here? Even I don't get this, But it worked. And there was also the chocolate cow. We had a almost actual size paper mache cow. We have a song called Dune Buggy. We had a song called Dune Buggy. It's one of the Spooky Kids tunes, and the chorus is chocolate cow, and I think it was a gift from a fan. Anyway, we had it on stage, and Brian simulated sex with it, and then dumped it out into the crowd, and it crowd surfed, and people tore it up. They absolutely tore it up, because we had a pretty strong contingent of punk fans who could, who liked the harder, faster stuff, and who could handle the weirder, more surreal stuff, and the girls liked what we wore, and they wanted to be around the girls. So, and if there came up a fast, rough song came up, I think we were playing Dune Buggy, and it was something fast and wild, and they just tore it up. And, the club's going to remember that. And they might not book you again, but, it's good to say you've been banned from someplace. Another thing that set us aside from other local bands is we were always making an effort to constantly promote ourselves. I mean, we flyered everywhere all the time. We made our own tapes, and we sold our tapes at the shows. We made our own T-shirts, and we sold the T-shirts at the shows. And, and every once in a while something would have a little element of shock to it, which would help, whether it would be on a shirt or on a tape. And we also had a hotline. We had a phone number with that would reach an answering machine that would have something crazy on it. And people loved that, We got a great variety of absolutely insane messages. And, that's as much distance as there is there, that's still, people like to be able to do that. So, I think that that helped propel us to getting signed, because we made an effort to get label attention pretty early. I thought we weren't ready, say by 91, like middle of 91, we started getting label attention, and I was glad about it, but I didn't think it was. I thought it was a little too soon. I thought we needed to grow as a band, but things worked out by 92, late 92. But locally, what helped us make a big impression locally was just constantly promoting and getting our music out there.
Cool.
I was artistically, I was pretty glad that we could just that we just did what we did. I mean, I wrote most of our music, and I just, you know, and Brian always wrote his own lyrics, and we never really. And now that I think about it, that's kind of odd. We never really catered to anybody. We never, what's the word? Jeez, really bad. I've been delirious half the night. We never really catered to any particular style. We never did, you know, what was. We never adopted any aspect of what was cool or popular, as far as our sound. So we did what we did, and people like it. When we brought in Fred, Sarah Lee Lucas, to play drums, there, I wasn't sure how people would take it, but it was, I mean, people loved the drum sounds that we had from the drum machine, but having a live drummer actually, I think did a lot to, I think we, you know, inside of like a year doubled our fan base, and I think having live drums really helped that out a lot. I mean, with the drum machine, the sounds are there, but with a drummer, the person is there. I mean, just the simple, you know, being able to see the sticks flying and moving, and to hear the drums acoustically, it really makes a big difference, you know. And it gave us a more rock and roll aspect, which is, but people, you know, they got into our music beforehand, and having live drums didn't change the music; it just changed the sound and the feel. And I think we gained a lot of listeners from that. John Tovar was actually at our very first show at Churchill's, and he was one of the people that hated us. He, you know, he didn't quite get it, and I don't blame him at all for it. But he'll tell you that he remembers, you know, walking away just hating it, just disgusted. And but about a year and a half, 2 years later, he approached us with his partner Frank Kalari to manage us, and you know, they helped out a lot. They got it. They understood what we were doing and how we were doing it. So they definitely helped out a lot. They would help book our shows. They would make sure we got paid. I mean, one of the reasons, you know, the scene in general in South Florida was thriving in the early '90s was because bands got paid. Bands that did well got paid. You know, now it's a little different. You know, it's a little sketchy. I mean, a lot of bands now don't have managers at all, and they don't really stand up for themselves and demand to be paid. You know. But John and Frank would help us get gigs. They got us our first out-of-town gigs in St. Petersburg and Tampa, and then they got us a show at what was it called, the Southeast Music Conference, SMC. I don't think they have that anymore, but that was in Atlanta, and a show in New York, and they helped us with label contacts and just keeping things together. As far as the band itself goes, and they were good. By the end of 1992, we had won Best EP/Single for Lunchbox at the South Florida Rock Awards, and what was it? February of '93, we won the Jammy Award for Entertainer of the Year, and we had labels looking at us. In fact, Sony, Epic were looking at us, and they actually paid for us to record what we called After School Special, which wound up being a 4-song demo, but it was our first 16-track production, and you know, we had what they call a demo deal or development deal, where they pay for the recording, but we own the recording. And after we did that, well, I don't know if they paid for us, but we went up to New York to audition in person for the A&R staff and the president of A&R. And it was only about 25 people, 25, 30 people in this really big, it was like a hangar almost, but it was like a rehearsal space for big productions. And we played, and it's really cold experience when you're used to like a packed club and you're just in front of, 20, 30 people in suits. Or people who are in suits, at least in their minds, just assessing us. And we put on a good show as best we could because we really got off crowd interaction. And but this was just a performance for assessment, and I thought they were gonna, but that's when they officially passed on us. So, I felt like a lot of momentum got going and then just stopped because this was our main contact. This was as close as we would get to the brass ring, so to speak. So, so we didn't get it. But after that, we actually won a couple other local awards. And then Trent Reznor came back into the picture. In August of 1992, we dropped the name The Spooky Kids, from Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids to just Marilyn Manson. And people ask why, and the short answer is it wouldn't fit on a marquee. But the long answer is pretty much just as simple. I think it was just the concept. We felt the concept would still be there, and having the Spooky Kids attached to it is kind of playful. But we wanted to get a little darker, a little scarier, but still be fun. And you're kind of, for lack of a better phrase, you're kind of stuck with a notion of goofiness when you have something like that, and you don't want that to stick with you. So it wasn't like a complete name change. Referring to us as simply Marilyn Manson was familiar anyway by this point. So so we could, the concept was still there, but we were acknowledging that it wasn't a front man and a band, it was the whole band. The whole band expressed the concept of Marilyn Manson, the duality. And that's about it. I think the general feeling within the band, or among the band members, was we really had, we were close to getting signed, and we were popular, and we had won awards, and I think our success kept us together. Whereas if we hadn't done quite as well, I think there would have been more tension and maybe even a breakup. I mean, it's impossible to say what would have been, but just the social interaction, the private interaction, the way the little fights that would come up in practice, arguments over writing and performance, things like that. I think that would have worn away at us if we hadn't been doing so well. But we were all having fun, and we could see, I think we could all feel success coming. Success, of course, being getting signed. I mean, getting signed is the brass ring, but it's really not what it's cracked up to be. Now, of course, we didn't know that, but that's what you're supposed to do. You do well as a local band, you're supposed to get signed by a record label and leave town. Writing with Brian Warner was always easier when he had a well-developed lyrical idea. And at any given time, any given time that he and I would collaborate, just the two of us, it was always easier if he had a fleshed out idea of what he wanted to sing. Otherwise, I would bring a riff or a song part or an entire song to the band, and we would go over part by part and just play while Brian would develop words for it, and we'd play this riff over and over for like 5 minutes, and he wouldn't come up with anything. And one of the things that created tension was we were wasting time because he didn't have an idea for something, which is okay, but we had practiced enough, and I thought I had taught him enough how to work things out better and smoother. And I think he took offense to the idea of me helping him or like teaching him anything. You know, sort of that kid's mentality of no, I can do it. So, but like I said, I think the success we were having, it didn't make the songwriting easier, but it relieved tension. You know, because whenever we worked on a new song or put a new show together, it was the reason was because we were doing well and we would continue to do well. And but in general, the way we would come up with songs was either the band would have an idea and then Brian would adopt lyrics, or it would just be he and I. I mean, that's how we started. It was just he and I, and it was very simple, and I think it worked a lot better than a full band collaboration. But you know, sometimes that changes throughout a band's career. I think around that time, Brian had a lot more ambition than I suspected, than I felt. I mean, he was more ambitious than I was, but I was glad about that because, you know, I would take care of the artistic stuff and the music writing, and he'd push the business end of things, and so I was glad about that. But I didn't know. You know, now in retrospect, I could see that it was more intense than I thought it was. So he was definitely driven, which works for any band. But we still had some fun, and I think it meant a lot to he worked so hard at everything because it meant a lot to him to achieve success at something he wasn't really familiar with anyway. Like I said, when he was a writer for 25th Parallel and Tonight Today, he learned about the business through the people that he interviewed. But now he was in the business, and he was being really careful to, you know, artistically we were all set up, but he was being real careful to drive things. So I think his ambition kind of got in the way. And his attitude might have been a little more harsh with people that didn't quite deserve it for business reasons. But that happens, and usually it's the lead singer. When we first started touring, our shows were a lot more tame than the local shows that we had been doing, because we were friendly with the management of the clubs that we were playing, and everybody expected something wild from our shows, and the managers of the clubs that we played would let us do it. So it was there was definitely a wilder element. I mean, we played really well when we went on tour, but when we played locally, we had just great, memorable shows. And I can't think of specifics. Sorry. I guess one example would be we had a Halloween show at a place called the Plus 5 that we used to play. And we had a naked girl wrapped in saran wrap up on a cross. That's one. That bothered a lot of people. And what else? I don't know, there's lots of crazy things. I mean, we handed out vitamins and people thought we were actually giving away drugs. You know, forget about the shock factor. We didn't have the money to buy them. What else? But you know, like with anything, the legend and the myth and you know, somebody will come, a new person will come to see us. And, you know, they'd exaggerate what they saw, or, you know, they'd tell their friends an exaggerated version, which would get the other friends to come. And so whether anything was true or sensational or not, it worked. You know, it didn't take much because, like I said, we were bringing, for lack of a better phrase, we were bringing some spectacle back to rock shows. towards the end of 1992, Brian went out to see Trent Reznor in Los Angeles for, I don't know, a week or so. And he was the only member of the band to go out there. And I'm not sure of what actually transpired and all that, but I think, they were talking about signing, about working together somehow. And by early '93, we were signed to Trent's new label. He had gotten a label deal through Interscope to found his own label called Nothing, and we were going to be the first band signed to Nothing. And that, unlike the effort with Sony and Epic, that actually went through, and we were the first band on Nothing, which was really good for us because we got a lot of attention out of it. I mean, Trent got a lot of attention, but he always included us whenever he, mentioned anything in the press. I think when we got signed and we started getting ready to record Portrait of an American Family, I think Brian became more difficult because he felt like a lot of pressure was on. But he was also more friendly with Reznor than anybody else was in the band, so I'm sure Reznor reassured him a lot and made sure things would go through smoothly. For myself, I can say I was just excited to be there because I went to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale as after high school, and I expected to eventually get a serious job at an ad firm or a graphic design firm. And after I graduated, I worked in print shops for about 2 years or so, but then the band took off, and I was just kind of surprised and kind of glad that I didn't have to get a real job, so to speak, and that my band was getting signed and my music was going to be published, and I thought it was great. Summer of '93, everything was in place business-wise for us to start recording at Criteria in North Miami. And Rolly Mossman from Fetus was scheduled to be our producer, and he was our producer. And we had fun, but things were professional, and we did most of the record in roughly about 2 months. And once it was all put together and sent for Trent to hear, his response was, "Gee, it sounds like a really good demo." And I can only speak for myself, but I think we were all crushed. And I felt not only some kind of hurt, but I also felt threatened in that, like, well, what does this mean? Are they going to charge us more to continue recording? Because I mean, things like that have happened before. They just, you got to record again. You got to record again. Okay, well, it's not going to cost us anything now, but they're going to take it out of us later. They'll charge us. The label will charge you for 3 albums when you only put out 1. So I thought that's what was coming. So what we did was Trent wanted us to re-record half of it and remix half of it. So that's what happened. We went out to LA to do the re-records, and by the time I got there, they had done the remixes, and they had changed a lot of things, and they played the tracks that they had changed, and they were kind of, Brian and Trent were kind of acting like they were doing me a favor, and but I felt an awkward kind of pressure because I felt like if I had said anything negative or I said anything critical, I would be seen as being difficult. Maybe, maybe not, but I think if you change any part of my work without me being there, then I have the right to do that. Maybe, maybe not. But so we re-recorded half the record and remixed half the record, and it turned out to be a really good product. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the album that we finished at Criteria. I think any element that Trent didn't like, he was just being too particular and too fussy about. And I think he wanted to put more of his name on the record. I mean, it was the record that, how do I want to say it? The Portrait of an American Family that nobody's heard, I think is just as good as the one that hit the shelves. But you know, for whatever reason, Trent didn't like it. You know, it was basically up to him. I think it was a good record, but I mean, I'm saying that, and nobody else in the world has heard it. So you know, there's a few people who have it, but again, it's impossible to say what would have been. I think it was around sometime in 1990. Brian had gone up to visit friends in New York, and he saw some kind of sex show, like some cable access channel sex show, and it was, he said it was pretty shocking, and I think that's where he got I know that's where he got the lyrics, or at least the idea for Cake and Sodomy, and in just reading them or him reciting them to me was like, you know, this is too provocative. I have to put some good music to this, you know, because nothing gets people going like, you know, both positively and negatively, like something that's got a good feel and a good beat and a cool sound and has really disgusting incendiary lyrics. So I'm glad that one made it to Portrait. That was, you know, we put that together in, I don't know, I'll say middle of 1990, but that's one of our oldest tunes and one of our most enjoyed. I mean, you know, we used to open shows with that, and that was like the most reliable way to open a show. People would love that. We'd just do a big build up for like 5 minutes and then play the song. People loved it. They all knew the words. It was great. And Monkey, My Monkey is another one. I think it's listed as Monkey on Portrait, but we used to call it My Monkey. It's a small difference, but still. I always thought it was a cool idea. The lyrics, or at least most of them, came from a Charles Manson recording, which we had to pay dearly for. But I like the idea. I didn't foresee it being a publishing problem, but it wound up being one, because effectively you're, you know, using something else that's published. But we took care of that, and there was just, I wrote some music. What was it? That actually started like I think '89, late '89 or early '90, like before. But it was one of the first songs that I recorded with Brian, and I had done acid for the first time, and the risk of making this sound like promoting it, I'm not at all promoting it, but it did make me hear things differently, and I wrote the main riff as I was coming down from it. And I doubt I could have written anything like that if I hadn't. So that tied in with, you know, Brian comes up to me and says, I have some lyrics. Well, they're not really mine, but they're from a Manson tune. I was like, well, these obviously go together. And people loved it because it was whacked out, but it had a groove. And again, that's what made me happiest about what we were doing in the early days and on up into recording Portrait, just being totally nuts and not having any rules and having people enjoy what you're doing and paying for it. It's an artist's dream. In September of '93, we had a showcase for Nothing Records. We had been talking to Trent Reznor for a while, and this was the show that would officially seal the deal as to whether Nothing would sign us. And it was pretty much in the bag, but still. And the only problematic factor was Brad Gidget-Keen. He was not fitting in. He was not working out. He had a lot of problems that we had to address along with him, And this particular showcase was his last show. He wound up recording the bass parts for Portrait, but that was his last show. When we started touring in '94, in spring of '94, and we did about, I don't know, maybe 10 or a little less than 10 dates opening for Nine Inch Nails before Portrait even came out in stores. But I was surprised at what a good response we got, because a lot of times very few people show up for the opener, whoever they are, and especially if they were unfamiliar with us. And I don't think anybody knew who we were, but anybody that caught us, by the time we were done with our set, you know, they were applauding, and these were big places. These were like thousand seat places, and you know, we were just high, literally and figuratively, because you know, things were working out. We had a bit of a scare with the album. I mean, Interscope didn't want to put it out, and then they agreed to put it out with. And Trent wasn't sure about how it was finally produced, but that worked out. And then Interscope didn't want to put it out, but then they agreed to put it out. So playing live shows out of town and actually getting a response, that was very, it was uplifting. It definitely kept us going. I think when we did those dates, before the record came out and after the record came out, because we continued opening for Nine Inch Nails for a while, I think that's when we really learned how to learn the craft of putting together a stage show. I mean, we got away with whatever we wanted to at home, and a lot of our shows were more sensational and had a lot of shock aspect because we could do what we wanted. The club managers would let us because we would fill the club. But going on tour and reaching a lot of different people all over the country, and then being reminded that your record's on the shelf and, you know, promote it, we were made more aware of that, and we were really conscious about when we would get new T-shirts to sell. And so the business, you know, the business side of the whole thing became a little more serious, and the stagecraft became a little more serious. Not to everybody in the band, but you know, to Brian specifically, probably more than anybody else. But we had a lot of fun too. I think Portrait's success came from the fact that, you know, the Nothing Records publicity machine, I think they made critics and fans expect something particular, because everybody was familiar with what Nine Inch Nails sounded like, and here they have their own label, and this is a new band that they're signing. I guess they expected us to be more industrial when we were more of a rock band, because we didn't work with anything. We didn't work with any sequencing or drum machines. You know, all our sound, our live sound, was totally live. And I think anybody that expected something else still enjoyed us. But it was quiet. It was like a summer sleeper release. Like in our earliest days, rock fans, you know, it wasn't quite rock enough for rock fans, or it was too industrial for rock fans, or it wasn't rock enough for industrial fans, or, you know, people weren't sure how to take it. But the songs themselves are what got people to buy it and to listen to it and to tell their friends to buy it. So I think it's a great first record, and I think it's a great first release because it wasn't over promoted. It wasn't like the label saying, driving the product. You know, they let people buy it. They didn't tell people to buy it. They let people buy it. And that's really how it's got to be done. At least with a rock band like us, you know, or like we were. We had a date in Salt Lake City, at the American Airlines Arena, and we were told not so early in the day. By the time we got ready to do sound check, we were told that we wouldn't be allowed to play, and that just didn't make sense. But it was kind of a good sign, because we knew that we were generating controversy and getting the ire of the religious public, or the religious right, I should say. And that was why, I guess, we were not permitted to play. We felt there was nothing to warrant banning us from playing. And we had gotten attention from parents groups and family groups and Christian groups before this. However, this was a very big venue, and we were told we couldn't play. And at some point, before Nine Inch Nails went on, Brian came out, and Trent said something, and Brian said something defamatory about the church, and he ripped up a Bible or a Book of Mormon. And of course, the crowd goes wild. And, you know, as far as I was concerned, I just wanted to play the show. And, but I knew that, you know, the religious right that complains about, you know, things that shouldn't be seen or heard, they always forget that, you know, talking about it is only going to promote it. So we got a lot of really good free PR out of it, and the right kind too, the right kind that would inflame and incense people in other places, and, you know, we'd get bigger by being banned and not playing. Again, I think it was simply a matter of people hearing about even one verse of lyrics, one set of lyrics, or just a line in a song. You know, a parent hears, you know, hears some what they consider bad words coming out of the stereo, and all of a sudden they have to take control of their child. You can't listen to this. The kid fights back, and then all of a sudden they boycott the shows. Well, if you stand outside our show picketing with signs, you're just going to draw more attention to it, and maybe we'll get like 10 more people in. So, like I said, like in the early days, you know, we would do something crazy or shocking on stage, and people would exaggerate. When they would tell about what they saw, you know, Saturday night, they would totally exaggerate it. Like, you know, if we would have a girl in a cage, it wasn't really a cage. It was a, you know, it was a couple like kids' mattress box springs tied together, and, you know, she had fake blood on her, and she was like in a bikini or like a negligee, and it's like, there was nothing. It's a show. But, you know, they would go and tell their friends, "Oh, you can't believe what happened." So, you know, things get exaggerated, and people who have nothing better to do take it all too seriously and inadvertently give us more more PR. The incident in Jacksonville, which is how we will refer to it, I think there was a bit of a setup. I mean, I don't think there would have been cops at the show right on time to see, you know, Marilyn Manson with, you know, sexual prosthetic, or whatever you want to call it, something that's barely a legal offense, you know, just barely. But I mean, if you know, if the police saw an opportunity and they were there just at the right time to see it, it's kind of a setup. But again, you know, anything like that is gonna help us. You know, don't arrest the singer. You know, they'll print his picture and they'll do a story about it. Oh, you know. What actually happened was Brian just had, to the best of my memory, he was just doing his regular act, and he had like a dildo, or took it out of a lunchbox and he wore it. Something very simple. I don't know if it was anything illegal, but like I said, you know, the cops were just there awfully conveniently. and we had a reputation before we got there. And Jacksonville is very, very right wing, very, very conservative. I mean, it's the buckle on the Bible Belt. Well, we weren't quite ready to put together a second record, and everyone, as far as the label and management and all, felt that we should do more live dates. But we needed a break, so we took a break and we went down to New Orleans to record with Trent Reznor again. And that's when we put together the EP. Since we weren't ready for a full second record, we put together the EP, Smells Like Children, which featured Sweet Dreams. And Sweet Dreams we had done a couple times locally in South Florida, but or maybe I'm not sure. Either we did it a couple times locally, or we only did it at the Portrait release party. But either way, it was something that we really felt good about. And you know, when you pick the right cover, it has sometimes when the right band picks the right cover, it can be real magic. And everybody, most everybody that heard it liked it, even if, but most importantly, people that, like younger listeners that weren't familiar with the Eurythmics version when it originally came out, they liked it, you know, and that's important because the people who heard it when it first came out by the Eurythmics, they were like, wow, that's a neat take on it, that's really cool. So when you have both sides doing that and buying the record, Smells Like Children, which also included remixes from Portrait and a couple other covers, like I Put a Spell on You. When you have people feeling that way about this single, so a lot of people would buy Smells Like Children, and there's a couple forgettable cuts on it, but that's really what propelled us propelled us to the level where people were anticipating Antichrist Superstar. I mean, that's what really put it over the edge, because Antichrist came out I left the band in May of '96, and Antichrist came out in October of '96, but when it came out, it debuted at #3 on the Billboard chart and eventually went double platinum. And that achieved everything Brian and I set out to do in 1990. You know, we jokingly said, let's put a rock band together and make $1 million. And that's kind of what happened. And the subtext was, of course, and let's piss a lot of people off, you know, especially the religious people. And that's what happened. I mean, here's this record that did very, very well. And it's called Antichrist Superstar. I mean, what could be more, you know, few titles that have debuted at #3 could be were more offensive, you know, if none, if any. The time off that we had between the tours and the recording, I think people kind of separated themselves from each other, and there was less collaboration as far as new songs and new material. So it was awkward in that if I brought a piece of music to Brian, he'd be more hesitant to just put lyrics to it, because you know he'd be working with somebody else other than me. And I wrote five or six tunes on Antichrist, but it's kind of fractured. I mean, there's no real cohesive. I mean, it's a good record and it's got good tunes on it, but there's no cohesive writing as far as all the tracks. I mean, there's some that stand out as better or worse than the others, but it was awkward as far as like the way the material came together and the way it went on the record. But it was still a good record. When we initially started recording Antichrist, it was, what was it? I think February or March of '96, and there wasn't a real clear-cut plan for the production of the album as far as the art of it, as far as the music. It was just like we had a bunch of ideas up in the air, and different people would make decisions at different times for different reasons. And it was kind of messy, and it was socially messy too. And also when we started, it was decided that we weren't going to record some older songs that we hadn't released yet, that we had only put out on 4-track. Like a fan favorite and one of my favorites, Suicide Snowman, was rejected. And it sounds small, but I mean, that was a big deal because that was a song that people loved, and it was just really good, and I couldn't believe it was said by Reznor that, you know, we're not going to do this one. Well, there's 16 tracks on the record, and there's about 10 more that went unfinished or undeveloped. So if at the beginning of the recording phase you're shutting out this tune, that tune, and the other tune, well, what about all the crap you just slog through? So, you know, tensions rose and people alienated each other, and it got pretty bad. Unbeknownst to the public, Antichrist Superstar was a much darker, serious, even threatening record. A lot of the fun and mayhem and surreal silliness that was with Marilyn Manson, even up to the point of Sweet Dreams coming out or Smells Like Children coming out, was pretty much gone. Was pretty much swallowed up by the more threatening, darker thing that came from Antichrist Superstar, and that was like the biggest, most significant change in the band and the band's appeal, because it was, you know, once you get darker and louder and scarier, you can't say, oh, I was just kidding. You've kind of got to stay there. I mean, Ministry went the other way around. Well, they didn't really go the other way around. They kind of went the same way, but they used to be very dancey, very much more towards the dance floor, and more melodic. But then, you know, like around 1990, they were the masters of industrial sound with like incredibly heavy, tough drum machine and guitar sounds that were just like ridiculous. But once you do that, once you change your sound that way, you can't go back. Or if you do, you better make it interesting, because, you know, new fans, like anybody that didn't own Portrait or Smells Like Children, that was into metal and then heard, you know, Beautiful People and went out and bought Antichrist Superstar, that's all they know. So if they were to hear something earlier, they might not like it as much, or maybe they would, but I mean, if you come in at a certain point in a band's career, you judge them by that time, you know. It is a concept album in that it's filled with concepts, but there's no common, real, solid thread. You know, there's lots of ideas. It's kind of like the Da Vinci Code. There are facts, but there's a lot of color and flavor and distractions and puzzles and clues that don't mean anything. So I mean, that's one reason it's a great record, because it gets the conspiracy theorists going. What does this mean? Well, you know, if I tell them it doesn't mean anything, it's going to break their hearts, because I know it doesn't mean anything and they want it to, you know, and that's the new psychic phenomenon. It's wanting, you know, despite somebody coming on TV and saying, you know, this is my uncle, he was in this suit, there's no Bigfoot, this is the suit. Doesn't matter to them. You know, they want to believe, they want to hang on to what they believe. UFOs, abductions, assassinations, all that stuff, you know. And that's, I'm not saying Antichrist Superstar is responsible for that, but I think it came out at the right time and helped breed that. And you know, if that's the case, that makes it an extra special record. Pretty much the reason or reasons I left the band was because there was a lot of favoritism going on, and a lot of my ideas were being neglected, and I just got really frustrated. And Brian definitely seemed to have forgotten about my my value. You know, the importance of me being not only the main music writer, but like his co-founder, his original partner. He just totally forgot about it. And I knew it couldn't get better if it had reached that point in his mind. I knew that things couldn't be better for me. He saw me as maybe not even as expendable, but less important than other people. And I wasn't going to stick around for that, because I had a lot of great ideas, and you know, if he wasn't going to help me develop them, I was going to do them on my own. So that's what I did. I came back to Florida and I formed my band 3 Ton Gate, and that's that. I saw the movie. I went to see the movie on my own, and I knew. Did I know? Yeah. I knew we had our version of "I Put a Spell on You," which we'd been doing for a while. Just a great, you know, the quintessential Screaming Jay Hawkins song. We'd been doing it for a while, and our version that's on "Smells Like Children" I knew was in the film. Now, film music being what it is, like when they take a band's song or a version of a song and they put it in, you expect to hear maybe 20 seconds of it, maybe 40 seconds of it. They used the whole entire song, and when I saw that, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do film music. I can't believe they used the whole song. And not to sound sexist, but when my guitar lead comes up, that's when Patricia Arquette gets naked. And it's just, the timing is great. You know, and I'm really proud of that tune. I think it's a great recording and a performance from everybody. Well, with my knowledge of marketing and advertising, and Brian's knowledge of media and print, we were like, you know, we could have put together a great ad firm, but we had a rock band, which is a much more fun vehicle for doing essentially the same thing. So we knew that provocation and shock would get other people to promote us. You know, like I said before, with the exaggeration of what actually happened at any given show, it would just take off. So I think that's what it comes down, and to be practical about it, I think that's what it comes down to. If you want to put a good rock band together, go to art school or go to school for media. Well, I was raised Jewish. Brian was raised Christian, and he went to a Christian school. So he had more of the he had more reason to lash back at the guilt and fear that came from his upbringing. You know, I didn't ever had any kind of issues like that. I never wanted to challenge, you know, a religious system. That's a personal thing, and that's where who you are personally meets who you are as an artist. Like, you know, if you have any feelings of revenge for anybody, who is it? And you're going to express that in your work. The artist is responsible for public reaction when the artist is trying to induce public reaction. Now, the tricky part about that is it's just so damn easy to lie. You know, did you want to upset these people? Why, no, Your Honor. Well, as a member of the artistic community, I know you're lying, but you're saying what it takes to stay out of jail or to keep keep the assassins away. So you know, like with anything really tough, it's yes and no. In general, if you do work, if you do some kind of, you know, dark work and it's full of symbolism, people read into the symbolism, listen, if you have a crazy brother that thinks he knows what my songs are about or what my art is about, he's crazy. So, he's going to get it wrong. Or if you're not crazy and you're upset about it, you don't want your kids to be around it, well, you haven't talked to me about it. You haven't asked me about my work. You haven't asked me why I do it or the way I do it. So that's, there's a lack of communication between an artist and, an artist, like, let's say a painter or a songwriter. That's one person. That's one person that affects hundreds, thousands, millions of people. Now, you can't just, like, people, one of those hundreds or thousands of millions of people can't come up to you and say, what did you really mean by this? The artist can only deliver what they want to deliver as far as an explanation. So if one out of your 1 million fans shoots somebody else because they think, that you suggested it to them, well, of course you didn't. You're just the artist. You put out your product. You did your work. It's absolutely not at all on the artist when something like that happens. And when it comes to an artist's influence, anybody can draw any conclusions. I mean, art has techniques, but it really has no rules. So as far as the way the public interprets it. So if you have something that is divisive or incendiary or shocking, or even something like children's nursery rhymes, you can read into anything, and because of that, it's more unfair to draw blame. To blame someone, or blame an artist, or blame an artistic movement or an artistic style for the war in Iraq. I mean, but somebody can, and somebody will, but it doesn't mean it's true.